And once again, we are back here on Living in the 21st Century. And once more joining me is Robert Nichols, owner of Boston Trust Realty Group. And Robert, it's a pleasure having you back once again to really educate the public out there at large on real estate.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Errol.
You're welcome. You know, there's some things that I seems not to be able to wrap my brain around when it comes to real estate. Every time I look around, it seems to be more listings, more houses for sale. It seems like there are fewer buyers.
That's correct.
And every time I look around, there are apartment buildings going up all across Massachusetts. What's really going on?
So that's just some really, really great questions. You touched on a lot of great points, Errol.
Yes.
So right now, what I'm seeing in the market, you have a lot of sellers who want to sell. You know, the inventory is actually increasing, so we're kind of in the midst of, I believe, the transition to a buyer's market. I feel values have plateaued, and so from an affordability standpoint, the buyers just can't take any more. They can't take any more abuse. They can't take any more bidding wars. They can't take these, you know, $100,000 or $50,000 over asking price scenarios, and they're really at a point where, as the inventory grows, they're in a position to have more leverage. And so from that perspective, I think, you know, what's driving this is the inventory first and foremost, but also with the apartments, there's more options. I know sellers who actually have decided to sell their homes and not buy, but wait it out. And so in the meantime, they're gonna rent, because typically in real estate, the rule of thumb is if you sell high, you have to buy high.
Right.
If you sell low, then you're gonna buy low. And a lot of these buyers kind of want to defy that logic by selling high, waiting it out, and buying low.
Well, that's pretty smart. But
Absolutely.
I look deeper. That's one aspect of looking at it.
Right.
But the real reason, though, why people want to really sell their homes, is it something to do with the affordability, their income earning potential? Is what these people were qualified for then, in the time when they would have purchased a house? Can their salaries today still enable them to afford paying for that house along with property taxes and these kind of things? What really is the major reason that so many people today want to sell their house? I mean, not looking now in terms of just waiting to sell to make a big profit or whatever the case may be. We're looking at it from the standpoint that it's something that pushing them to sell their house rather than just focusing on a profit alone. What really is the root for that?
Well, I'll be honest, I believe the profit really is what's driving a lot of people to test the waters. I mean, we speak to sellers every day all over the greater Boston area. And, you know, the majority of the folks who express initial interest in selling, it's due to the fact that they know the market conditions are ripe for selling. They know it still is a seller's market as we are transitioning through it. And at the same time, they want to see how much they can get. I think a lot of sellers now aren't as, you know, as motivated or as serious as we've seen in the past.
Right.
But you also have to keep in mind there's a lot of developers buying properties, renovating them, or demolishing them and rebuilding them. And so that's a huge piece of the market. You know, I kind of call this the HGTV effect, in that, you know, everybody now watches HGTV.
Right.
And so the expectations of buyers nowadays who are paying top dollar and paying a premium is in line with what they see on there. They see the shiny finishes, these, you know, stone countertops, open concept. These are the buzzwords nowadays that you must have if you want to sell for top dollar and compete with a superior inventory, quality of inventory above anything we've ever seen. Now, we all know that the housing stock in Massachusetts is, you know, some of the oldest homes in the country, consists of some of the oldest homes in the country. And so from that perspective, you know, the buyers are looking for the ones that stand out from that typical traditional 1900 style home that was merely just renovated. They want something with the bells and the whistles. And so there are tons of developers out here and more flippers getting in. And, you know, for example, in the Boston condo market, I think we're probably at least 3 times the inventory we were last year, because there's just so many developers, investors, flippers, call them what you want, because it is a very great range and experience and skills who are out here kind of increasing the inventory by flooding the market with units, which again is driving it down. And thankfully, that's one way it is becoming more affordable. Because I do feel we have an affordability crisis, and we're at the tipping point where we're going to see things start to dip a little bit, and just to have a healthy adjustment, because people need to be able to afford a home. I mean, this is a fundamental American value. The American dream is home ownership, and so if we want to continue to achieve that, especially in our urban centers, it's super important that values are kind of kept in check, and the market will do that over time.
Okay. So would you say then that people are more into buying homes as an investment, or are there more buyers ready to buy in the market? Are they more qualified to afford a home in today's market? What does that state at that point?
Great question. So right now, financing has eased up quite a bit since the financial crisis of 2008. And, we're kind of at a point where, it's a healthy place. Rates are low. The criteria is fair. It's not, overly generous like it was where anyone could buy a house. I mean, there's case studies where I read once a member of a mariachi band needed to provide proof of employment, and what he did was he signed an autographed photo of himself in his band, and was able to get I believe, $700,000 loan from Countrywide. This was in 2007.
Okay.
So we've come a long way from there. So it's not quite as crazy as that was.
Right.
However, I think that from that perspective, it really is helping to keep things healthy, and so. Buyers nowadays, are really, I think, at the core motivated by either, they have to buy because they're relocating and they don't want to, they want to make an investment long term. Because, the rule of thumb I always advise my buyers is if you're going to stay somewhere for at least 10 years, it makes more sense to buy, because over any 10-year period in our history, the property values in any market have appreciated. And so that's kind of a litmus test for buyers who are ready to build wealth. I mean, I don't see a lot of buyers kind of buying and then trying to upgrade, in a very short amount of time. I see people more stationary, like I said, because, folks who aren't looking to do that, they have so many options to rent, as we discussed, as the rental inventory is, for new construction rentals is at its all-time high as well.
Okay. Well, I want to look basically, before we go into some more of these questions.
Yep.
Now, we know for a fact that in the real estate market, now, the buildings itself or the homes themselves has a way of depreciating over a period of its useful age, right?
Right.
If you use a comparison approach from community to community, that can also have a price effect on how the value goes up. But what really, is it the land, what really makes the property appreciate more over a period of years, when in essence it can depreciate?
Right.
Even though you may put money into it in upgrading the property,
right.
If that community in itself is not being elevated, its standard of raising to the next level in terms of being valuable may not really get to that level. So how would it then be more appreciated in value?
So there's a lot of things, a lot of factors that drive home values, and if I can predict, where the market is going at any given time, I'd be one of the richest men in the world.
Okay.
But the one thing I will say is real estate is cyclical. And so from that perspective, as the cycle goes, there are dips, ebbs and flows. But overall, the trajectory typically over 10 years has been this. It's been up. So from that perspective, the values are derived from, location first.
Okay.
As you said, is I think that's very obvious.
Yes.
That's a primary driver, and then the improvements you make. But throughout the cycle, there are going to be some dips. It's not a straight shot up, and so homeowners need to be vigilant of that. Homeowners also need to be careful not to overinvest in their homes, because if you're in a market where you end up buying at a price point where it's very high, and then you go and make all these additional improvements, there is such a thing as overinvesting, and so that's where you want to contact a seasoned real estate professional to kind of advise you on what improvements will yield the best returns without overdoing it. And so I think to really sum it up, the cycle is going to have the dips and the increases, but the location trumps everything at the end of the day.
Okay. Yep. So basically tell me now, is this a good time right now to invest?
Depends.
People love the flipping of the homes.
Right.
It seems like a good concept.
Right.
But is it really a smart move now at this point to start investing in homes and probably fixing them up and flipping these homes? And how effective now also is flipping at this point?
Great question. So I am an active flipper as well, in addition to being a licensed realtor and broker. And so my strategy right now, I am kind of dialing it back because I see that the market is being flooded with investors. You have, like I said earlier, there's a range of experience in the people purchasing homes in order to flip them in the short run. And so in my opinion, some people are overpaying and they may get caught and not make the profit or even take a loss. While if you're able to get a deal, it really depends on the numbers.
Right.
Then for sure, there are still deals here where you can buy properties, renovate them, and sell them for a profit. Because the one thing is, again, superior quality product versus the competition. If you can put enough into it without overdoing it to be superior to the competition in your specific location, then it makes sense. But overall, I'd say to just be very careful for anyone looking to flip and make a quick return. Now, on the flip side to that, no pun intended, there are a lot of investors who are looking to buy and hold, and I honestly feel it's very tough to do that at the top of a market. Unless you're sitting on a lot of capital and you need to do a 1031 exchange and you're forced to buy to not pay the tax liability associated with the profits, then definitely I think a lot of those guys are able to buy and it makes sense to them. But if you're really not in a rush and there's no duress and you're looking kind of on the market, it's really tough to find deals where you're going to get a really good return without putting a ton down. So, I mean, there are off-market deals, but there's just so much competition out there that the seasoned guys are getting those, whereas everyone else is kind of competing for the lesser attractive investment properties.
Yeah, I heard you mention 1031 exchange. What exactly, for the person out there who doesn't know, what is a 1031 exchange?
So I'm definitely going to preface this first by saying, talk to a tax accountant. I know you had a tax accountant on here recently, Mr. Hughes Marshall, who I know well, before you make any decisions. Do not, I'm not a tax preparer. I'm a real estate broker. I do know some about it, but so I wanted to preface it with that first. And so the 1031 exchange is basically a rule that the IRS has established that allows people who own investment property. You can't do this with your single family, owner-occupied house. But if it's an investment home, then you can sell that home and buy what they call a like kind. And so tax preparer will be able to, or tax accountant will be able to tell you specifically which properties meet that like kind criteria. But if you find a property that's like kind, you can basically roll your tax burden into that property if you acquire it within a certain amount of time. I think you have 45 days to identify it and 180 days to close on it. And so if you follow those rules and follow the guidelines, you're able to postpone paying your tax liability on the sale, which is pretty significant if it's an expensive property and a healthy profit. So a lot of seasoned investors utilize that vehicle to really protect their profits, keep more money in their pocket, and leverage their understanding of it to continue to grow and scale. Yeah.
Well, we are down through the close to the end of the year. We're speeding down through this year pretty fast.
It's going really quick.
With 2019 though, do you see continuously the market will continue to rise? Do you see it crashing? What is your expectation of 2019 real estate market? Is it favorable to the brokers? Would it be favorable to the sellers, the buyers? What are the suspicions about it?
So my thought is, I think as the market adjusts downward, it is going to transition to a buyer's market. And I think right now, one of the things we have in real estate is if you don't list, you don't last. A lot of listing agents are really enjoying themselves, and this is your time. So make as much as you can if you're a listing agent out there. But as far as what's coming in 2019, I believe we will see the shift to a buyer's market. And as that shift occurs, I believe that it'll definitely be very advantageous to be looking to buy as values will adjust down a little bit, and people will begin to see the return of some level of affordability. Not quite to where a lot of buyers, a majority of folks will want to see it, but I believe that the market, as it ebbs and flows, it always does. We're kind of overdue for an adjustment, but again, it'll be a healthy adjustment. And buyers should be ready to take advantage of it this spring, as the inventory typically is the largest. So the spring of 2019, I think that's going to be a big buyer's market.
Nice. Well, tell me something. The president recently would have placed some tariffs in taxes on some countries on their commodities that they export to America. And to some degree, it's going to have an indirect form of taxation where consumers are going to pay a higher price in one way or the other. And systematically, it's going to camouflage its way in the way how people purchase things.
Right.
And it will have an effect definitely on whatever you go to purchase. Doesn't matter what type of materials you are purchasing, be it a house or otherwise. How do you see the rates, the tax rates next year for consumers? How do you see it? Would it be favorable for them, or is it going to be a little bit more costly for them? How would it have an impact on real estate?
I think consumer spending habits, obviously, the more these tariffs and taxes take effect in the form of increased pricing for goods, I believe it will have an impact on the market as well. Again, affordability. Right. Consumers only have so much disposable income, and that piece is also a part of what they save to put a down payment towards a home. I think first-time home buyers will be fine. I think that sector of the market will be protected because the minimum down payment for first-time home buyers in this region of the country, with the mass housing loan is 3%. Nationally, FHA loans is 3.5%, which most folks I think can gather 3.5% to purchase a home with a fair amount of effort, not too much effort. Whereas I think the second-time home buyers or third-time home buyers in that, let's say 500,000, 600, 700, those jumbo loan rate areas will definitely probably scale it back a little bit. And I think that's going to be the first sector of the market, the luxury market, and then inclusive of some of the lower tier sectors of that market, 500,000 to 700,000. We'll see those buyers or sellers maybe scale things back and kind of hold off a little bit. As if they have more luxury vehicles, or other assets, or the higher purchasing and spending habits, they may not have the disposable income to kind of upgrade a home or buy a home to begin with, or try to sell something and move up, try to upsize. So I think that sector is probably the sector of the market that'll kind of be the first to dip a little bit.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, listen, the other thing I want to ask is that I would have heard, and I speak in subject to correction, subject to correction, that unless your home is valued over $500,000, that you won't have any form of tax exemptions. You'll be excluded to some degree from tax exemptions. Is that really true?
So from my understanding of the new tax law, I believe it's been capped. So, that also is going to affect folks because previously, consumers were able to write off their interest, for a significant amount of the loan amount, based on the loan. However, now that the tax law has been revised, definitely it is going to affect, again, some of the money coming back to homeowners negatively for the most part. So I know it was done in order to try to, decrease the tax liability overall, and they had to get it from somewhere. But for those homeowners in that upper echelon, that's another factor. Very good point you bring up. That also leads me to believe that market is definitely due for a correction in 2019.
Well, I believe it should because for the lower income earner or the person that barely qualified to get a loan, and they may very well be qualified to meet a $250,000 loan, but they go and put their hard-earned money that they probably barely saved to make a down payment on that home. It doesn't put them in any tax. It doesn't put them in any exemption category that they can say, when the tax year comes, let me file for some form of an exemption.
That's right. They lose
Was
the
that
incentive.
in itself, wipe out a high level of potential buyers who may qualify for a certain loan? And then if that is the case, then how would it really impact the market positively?
So I think the lower end of the market, buyers primarily are buying as an investment to build wealth, to get their piece of America, to get their feet wet and kind of really start establishing themselves long term to build wealth. And so from that perspective, I don't think the lower end of the market is really going to be impacted much because a lot of the buyers that we've worked with in the past, the tax exemption is great. but more importantly, they want a place to live, and they want a place they own, so that they know someday, whether they do a 15-year mortgage, 20-year, or 30-year mortgage, that house is going to belong to them, and they can leave it and pass it on to their children, or leverage that equity to buy something else and start investing. So I don't see the lower end of the market really being affected much by the changes in the tax code, to be honest.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, the other thing I want to ask, in this case, two questions basically. If a person who has I think I asked this question the last time, who would have taken out a loan, who just taken a mortgage to purchase a home, is it possible that they can get a second mortgage to get a next home? Or is it best in this case to get an equity loan on that first house they purchase and buy that next home for investment purposes?
It's all about timing. And so when I say that, typically when you buy a home, there's a certain time frame to where, unless you're getting it undervalued.
Right.
If you're, just say traditional sale, you're buying a property at market value, you have to wait for the market to appreciate in order to be able to take equity out of it. And usually there's, I believe, anywhere from a 90-day to 180-day waiting period before you can look to explore those options with a lot of lenders, whether you do a full refi and cash out, or you do a HELOC. In most cases, it's easier to do a home equity line of credit, aka HELOC,
Right.
in order to tap into the equity when the time is right.
Right.
Because the criteria is a lot less rigid or strict, and it doesn't require restructuring of the loan. It's just adding a second lien to the property, which can be done kind of in its own space,
Right.
Not involving the first lien holder or any
Okay.
other parties. So, but I'd say that typically you're going to have to wait a few years to be able to do that. It's going to take time in a traditional market. Like I said, unless you're able to find a really good deal that needs a ton of work, and you put in the equity and sweat equity, as we call it, and you take a loan to renovate it, and you do that, and then you can refi and cash out, then yes. But I think the logic behind doing that, the logic of buying a home, letting the equity build, and then leveraging that to kind of start building your real estate portfolio or real estate investment strategy is very smart. But the key factor that a lot of people don't talk about is the time it takes to do that. So I was talking to someone recently who did this, one of my clients, and it took him 5 years to do that. But he's really built a lot of wealth after he waited that 5-year period after buying his first property. And now I think he's on his 7th property. And I have another gentleman I know, he did it as well, but he did it a lot faster. The market conditions when he bought were just ripe. He bought, I think it was in 2004, and then he ended up selling in 2005. It's because that market was appreciating very rapidly back then. So he kind of defied the typical time frame. But I think with the lending being very stable and rates being kind of stable now, there's not a lot of big jumps in either direction. That 5-year period is the time frame you want to be thinking. You want to kind of just broaden your time frame for that strategy.
All right, beautiful. So how can a person basically sit back and gauge when the market is really on its down level, when everything seems to be getting smaller in price, where you can jump in there, grab it, and hoping that when you grab it, there's not too many renovations you have to do, that you can just do the basic requirements and then let it appreciate. How do you gauge when is the right time?
So a couple of things. I think it starts with educating yourself on the market. So one way to do that, there's a lot of great tools online for free out there that you can leverage. Sites like Zillow, and the estimates aren't always correct, but they do a lot of financial and economic reporting quarterly, monthly. You can kind of get a gauge to where the market's trending, which is really good data.
Right.
Another way is, if you're a real estate junkie, you just kind of tour open houses over the weekend. Make it a habit of checking out open houses in your neighborhood or the neighborhood you're interested in being in. They're looking to move somewhere else, so that you're really you understand when something maybe come on that's just a little undervalued.
Right.
But I think the easiest way, and I know this is kind of shameless promotion, contact a realtor, or a good realtor. They're not all created equal, but find a quality realtor, find someone who knows the market, because this is what we do all day. We're out here, we're working in the marketplace. And we're here to be your advocate. We're here to represent your interests and make sure you make a smart decision. And so, if you do that and you find the right person, you're definitely in the right guide, you're definitely gonna be set up for success with your purchase. Yep. So my company and I, we're here to help. There's over 40 agents in my office. So Boston Trust Realty Group, feel free to give us a shout.
That's nice. That's nice. I know we're getting down on the final minutes of the program.
Yes.
But really, tell the public at large what seems to be a good approach when they're going to really go out there and buy a house, not just to live in, but probably buy as an investment property. Because I believe there are many people out there who are considering, you know what, it's good to get myself a next home and eventually sell that home. How would you advise that person on the best approach to take and when is the right time to take it?
Got it. Very good point. I mean, it all depends on your timeline.
Yes.
If you are looking to buy something and live in it for many years, you know, that's, you know, you really want to find a home that meets your needs.
Right.
You know, if you're looking for, you know, spacious yard or you want a garage, don't compromise on those things. If this is a long-term purchase, if this is something where you're looking at it as a stepping stone, maybe you want to start off as at a condo and then upgrade, then from that perspective, you know, just get into something that meets your needs now that's affordable for you, so that you're set up to, you know, not overpay, but more importantly, you still can save money simultaneously. You don't want to be house poor, especially if you're buying, you know, as a first-time buyer and looking to leverage that into something else in the near future. So it's really two perspectives. If the long view is the 10-year view, get what you want. Same thing, make sure it's affordable, but at the same time, it's a little bit different perspective because you're gonna be a little bit more picky. But with the lower end of it, if you're really just looking to it as a stepping stone, you definitely just want to get into something that allows you to save as much as possible and hopefully appreciates quickly over time.
Okay. So in final analysis, we are done for our last 2 moments.
Yes.
So considering all of that, you would say then to the public at large, if you're going to buy a home, make sure that your timing is correct.
That's correct.
And how long then, if that person just buying it as an investment property, what do you think is the maximum amount of years they should probably stay in that home, or how long do you think is a good considerable time that they should keep that home for before selling?
10-year window. You
10-year
gotta
window.
always make a decision based on a 10-year window. And the good news is that if the market gets better within that time frame, which it typically does and usually has, then you're positioned to take advantage of it.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Well, Robert, it's a pleasure having you here once again to educate us on real estate.
Anytime.
We have come to the last minute of the program.
Yep.
And to all those who have been tuning in, take good care, and we'll see you again.
Thank you for having me, Earl.
Thank you, Robert.
Take care.
It's harder whenever there's a bigger group. Pretty much a good day for me would be people leaving their hands off of me. I'm always called names. Everywhere that I go, there's always someone calling me names, calling me gay. I've been choked, thrown up against a wall, punched. Nobody's ever tried to help me.